Greetings and salutations, and thank you for clicking on the video. Today I'm going to show you how to get started with Linux Mint, how to install Linux Mint, and some of the setup that you need to do after you get the system running on your computer. A couple of years ago I did a video like this about Ubuntu 14.04, and that video was wildly popular. So this is my update on that video, and I'm choosing Linux Mint because Linux Mint 18 is getting a lot of attention in the tech press. And a lot of folks who are just learning about Linux and are just curious about it are learning about it, and this is a good place to start if you're just starting out. Today's installation will be probably the most surefire way to get it going on your system. We're not going to get into things like advanced disk partitioning. We're going to assume that the computer that you're installing on has one hard drive on it, and we are going to make sure that we get a good solid install on that drive. If you need to do things like use advanced disk partitioning, if you have more than one drive in your machine, then you can certainly watch this video, but before you actually attempt to do that, I suggest that you go look that up, okay? Make sure that you are comfortable with that idea. Also, this video is going to take some time. This is not something that you can do in 10 minutes. And while I will be pausing the video during parts of the process that take a while, it's still going to be a bit of a long video. So get yourself a drink, get yourself some popcorn. You might want to pause the video and do that now and get yourself comfortable so that you can take all of the information in. I will post this guide that I have put together here in the description for this video as well, so you can get it from there and copy and paste it and print it out so you have it hanging around as you roll through the process of getting started with Linux Mint. So the first thing that we need to talk about is getting prepared to install Linux Mint, and the very first thing that you need to do is create a bootable DVD or USB stick, something that is going to allow you to actually boot Linux Mint on the computer you intend to install it on. All right, and to get a hold of that media, the first thing that you need to do is get yourself an image of Linux Mint, and you would come to the Linux Mint site here. We'll go directly to the download page, and the one that they're offering right up front is Linux Mint 18 Sarah. That is the latest version of Linux Mint. And then we have a decision to make, and that is whether we want a version that has the Cinnamon desktop or the Mate desktop. These are just desktops. This is a different kind of user experience, and which one you choose will be number one, personal preference, or number two, what kind of hardware you're installing Linux Mint on. If you have a relatively new machine with lots of memory and a multi-core processor, Cinnamon is a good way to go. I really like the Cinnamon desktop. If you have an older machine, let's say one that's more than 3 or 4 years old and it has less than 2 gigabytes of memory in it, maybe a single core processor, then you're definitely going to want to go for the Mate desktop. It's lighter weight and it tends to run better on older hardware. Also, you'll need to choose whether you get a 32-bit or 64-bit edition. Only get a 32-bit edition of Linux Mint if you are going to install it on a machine with a 32-bit processor. Those are getting harder and harder to find these days, and 32-bit support in the Linux world is starting to be deprecated right and left. So that means that you are not going to be able to install Google Chrome, for instance, if you're running a 32-bit system, because it is no longer supported. So hopefully you've got yourself a nice machine with a 64-bit processor in it, and you can choose the 64-bit image, and that way you'll make sure that you have full functionality for the foreseeable future. So we're going to choose the 64-bit version, and we're going to choose the Cinnamon version. And when we click on that, you'll see that we have all kinds of download options. If you know how to use torrents, you can use a torrent file to download it that way, or you can scroll down here and find a mirror for your country, or at least a mirror that's close to you. If you are doing this in the US, you have many mirrors to choose from, and a lot of universities host the Linux Mint distribution, and so you would choose one close to you. In my case, I usually choose James Madison University, but any one of these links should work for you. And you download your file, and now you have the file necessary to install Linux Mint. The next thing that you will have to do is put that file on something that you can boot from. If your computer has a functioning DVD drive in it and you have blank DVDs and you're not very computer savvy, I actually recommend that you go ahead and create a bootable DVD. There are fewer steps in the process, and it's usually easier to get a machine to boot from a DVD than it is from a USB stick, especially some older machines. If you're used to booting from USB, or you don't mind the extra steps involved and you think you can handle it, then you can certainly use a USB stick. A USB stick is going to be a much faster option for booting Linux Mint, and you also have some extra options like you can actually run Linux Mint in a live mode for a while from a USB, and if you create persistence on the drive, in other words, a place to hold your settings and things, then you can actually use the system and save settings and things like that. But if you just want to play around with it, you just want to get it installed, you don't want to fool around with that, a DVD is a really good option. Although it does take quite some time to boot from a DVD, depending on how fast your hardware is, it could be 5 minutes to actually boot the machine from a Linux Mint DVD. That's just the way it is. It does not reflect the performance of the system once installed. It's just slow DVD speeds. If you'd like to learn more about creating a bootable USB drive, then I suggest that you go to this page right here. And here you will be able to find software to create bootable DVDs if you're running Windows. And also if you're running a Mac system, you can create bootable devices here. We are not going to talk about installing Linux Mint on a Mac. We're talking about installing it on Windows. But if you have access to a Mac, you may want to make your USB stick there. It might be easier for you. So do check out this site here. It's got lots of options, and it's got a couple of programs that I've used in the past, UNetbootin and Rufus, and where you can get those and how you can install them and how to actually make the bootable USB stick. Okay, so now we have some media to play with. The next thing that we want to do is boot Linux Mint. You may have to turn off Secure Boot in your computer's BIOS settings to be able to boot from a DVD or USB drive. So if you boot it and you get nothing but a blank screen, you may have a later model machine that has Secure Boot enabled. Secure Boot is a system that basically doesn't allow the computer to boot from anything but its own hard drive, so you need to turn that off first so you can actually boot the system. Look up your make and model of computer, and you should be able to find a guide that will tell you how to access those settings in your BIOS and how to turn them off. Once you get Linux Mint 18 booted, take some time to play around with it, ensure that all your hardware is working properly. You want to check to see if you need any proprietary drivers for your system. Take some time to read through the Linux Mint user's guide about installation on your system. It's very good idea to just play with this for a while before you move on to the next step and make sure that you're comfortable with it. So let's take a look at what it's going to look like once it boots up. This is running in a virtual machine, and you'll notice here that we have an extra folder on the desktop, and this is just part of my virtual machine setup. But if you have hard drives in your computer that have like a Windows installation on them, you may see them pop up here, and you'll actually have access to the files on those drives. And if the welcome screen doesn't open automatically, you can find it in the menu here. You just type in welcome and it'll pop right up. Here's where you can look at the documentation for Linux Mint, and I strongly suggest that you do that. Take some time and look at this, and it just opens up a web browser here, and it gives you access here. It's in PDF format, so we want to look at English, PDF for Linux Mint 18, and now it opens up that PDF file, and this is where you can find it. And that's always available to you, and this is rather in-depth documentation, and it explains the installation process. My process for installing Linux Mint is going to be a little bit different than you might read in the installation, and that's just because I'm going to show you the most foolproof way to do it. Okay, this is the way to make sure that it gets installed properly and it's running on your system and it avoids a lot of pitfalls. But there's more than one way to do this, so it's not that one is right and one is wrong. This is just the one that works the best for me and my Easy Linux clients. Also, while you're here, you can look at the drivers and see whether you're going to need drivers for your system. This is very important if you have Wi-Fi. If you get an error message when it boots up that says that the Cinnamon desktop is running in software rendering mode, you may need video drivers. So right now it's going to go out and look and see if there are drivers available for this particular system. And if it doesn't find any at all and everything seems to be working properly, you got your audio, you got your Wi-Fi, your internet's working okay, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong. Linux Mint comes with a lot of drivers already in the Linux kernel, especially if you have a machine that's 4 or 5 years old. Most of those drivers are available in the kernel, especially if it has Intel hardware inside. A lot of the Intel drivers for video cards have been rolled into the kernel, and you don't need to download anything. And it's not necessarily like a second-class driver like an open source driver. It is the actual Intel code that's in there because Intel works very closely with the Linux Foundation. So you see we've got a bunch of drivers available for this machine. And since this is running in a virtual box, it actually has the virtual drivers already installed. So if you're going to install to a virtual box and you're using this video as a guide, you will get basic rudimentary functionality right out of the box, but I do strongly recommend that you actually upgrade those drivers. We also have drivers for the CPU microcode, and so that is good to know. So we're going to assume that everything is working the way it should and that we have all the drivers that we need. And we're going to jump back over here and look at the guide yet again. There we go. Took a minute to render. Okay, so we've got the machine booted up. We've played around with it. We know we actually want to do this. So the next thing that we need to do is back up all of the data on the machine that you want to keep. Every bit of it. If you're going to reload this machine with Linux Mint, it's important to understand that the hard drive is going to be erased. Your Windows installation will go away and all of the data that is part of it. And those of you who have been around computers for a while may think that I'm kind of belaboring the point here, but there are a couple of things I want to go through because I have run into these problems doing installation for Easy Linux clients. First of all, you have to back up your software in a format that Linux Mint is going to be able to read. So you do not want to use the Windows backup utility. You do not want to use commercial backup software to do this. Linux Mint is going to be able to read files that are stored in the open or files that are stored in a zip file only. Anything else, it probably will not be able to read it, and then in order to get your data back, you actually are going to have to reinstall Windows, back it up properly, and then install Linux Mint. I went through that with one client who didn't quite understand that. Also, make sure that you do your backup on something that is not connected to the computer all the time. You can't put it on a local hard drive, especially if the machine only has one hard drive. If your machine has 2 hard drives in it and you only intend to install Linux on one of the drives and you're going to leave the other drive as is for like data storage, which is perfectly all right, and there's no problem in doing that, other than the fact that if that drive is formatted NTFS, that may present a problem down the road because Linux doesn't do the maintenance that NTFS requires, and that file system may break. But for the time being, you can do that. You could always reformat that drive later. Linux has no problem reading and writing to NTFS. It's just that you do not have the Windows check disk program available to you if Windows is not running on the system, so therefore you won't be able to fix problems that come up with that NTFS drive. But yeah, if you have a second drive on the machine and you don't intend to touch it, you could put your files there. But really the safest thing to do is make sure that you put it on some sort of USB device, whether that be a USB stick or a mass storage device that hooks up to USB. And like I said, it's okay to use zip files. So make sure that everything is backed up and you are able to open it when booted from Linux Mint, and you can actually see those files one way or another. Okay? Now we are ready to start the installation process. And the first thing that we need to do that here is we're going to use a utility called gparted. And what we're going to do is prepare the hard drive for Linux Mint. This will be the main drive in your machine. It usually is listed as SDA. That is usually your boot drive. And it's the one where you will see partitions that look something like this. If you're running Windows 7, for instance, you'll see maybe a recovery partition, and you'll see a drive called OS. That way you know exactly what drive your system has been booting from, and it's set up to boot from, and this is the one that we want to use. So we're going to jump over here and look at our guide real quick. Before we go any further, it is important that you understand that once you start this process, there is no way back. You cannot uninstall Linux Mint, and once Linux Mint is installed, the only way that you will be able to restore the machine back to using Windows again is to reinstall from Windows Installation Media to completely blank out the hard drive and start over. Okay, this is very important to understand. This is why we backed up all of our data. We want to make sure that we don't lose anything we want. It's actually a really good idea to install Linux for the first time, not on your main computer that you use every day, but on another machine. There is also the option of setting up a dual boot. I don't recommend dual boot for beginners because it raises a lot of issues that may cause problems down the line. Something may break and you might not know how to fix it, and it will cause you a lot of heartburn. So if you're first starting out with Linux, I actually recommend that you get yourself a secondary machine. Maybe you have an old PC in a closet somewhere. Maybe you pick one up at a yard sale or from the Goodwill or something like that. Whatever, just get another machine. Then you can install Linux on it. You can run it next to your current Windows machine, and you can get comfortable with Linux before you decide to dump Windows entirely. A lot of people that use Linux never dump Windows. They just move certain tasks over to the Linux machine. Okay, they may want to keep Windows around because they have a bunch of games they want to play, or there might be some software that they need. That's fine. You can have that other computer running, but to actually blank out Windows and start over with Linux Mint, that is a big step. And if you're not completely comfortable with that idea, it may cause you a lot of frustration down the road. Just letting you know before we get into this process, because once we start, we can't go back. It is a good idea to have another computer, a smartphone, or a tablet available so you can have access to the internet. That way, if you run into any problems and you need to look them up and try and figure out what's going on, you'll have some way to do it. And you'll also want to turn off Secure Boot and UEFI completely. This is my way of dealing with it. Linux Mint will happily boot on a UEFI machine that does not have Secure Boot available, and it will also install to a UEFI device. I don't like it. I just turn it off, and we just use the old legacy mode, the BIOS mode of booting the machine. It's the simplest, easiest way to go, and unless you have some specific reason why you want to have UEFI enabled on your computer, then I don't see really a need for it. So that's the way I deal with it. Also, if your Wi-Fi didn't work in the live environment and you looked at the drivers and you noticed that you needed to install a driver, at this point you're going to have to hook the computer up to an Ethernet cable to make sure that you have internet access as the system installs. You will not be able to install those drivers unless it can go download those drivers. So that's something to keep in mind. And the next thing here is to boot Linux Mint, and then I'm going to show you how to use gparted. We're going to do that right now. So we'll jump back over to our Linux Mint installation. I have already started gparted, and so we're going to show you what we're going to do here. Gparted is a disk manager that edits partitions and creates partition files, or partition tables rather is what I need to say. And what we're going to do is just make sure that we have a new partition table. We're going to do a clean start here. So go to Device, make sure that you are on the drive that has that OS partition if you're had been running Windows, or the drive that you know you're going to boot the machine off of. Make sure that you do not choose the USB stick that you booted Linux Mint off of, because then it'll just trash your install disk and you have to go back and remake it. Okay, it's going to offer to create an MS-DOS partition. There are some other choices here. MS-DOS is the one we're going to use. If you want to use something different, then I'm assuming that you are pretty computer savvy and you know why you want to use something different. So We're going to go ahead and apply this. And now it has erased the partitioning that was on there, and essentially we have a clean hard drive to start with for our install. If your machine had UEFI enabled and it had a different partitioning scheme, you may get an error message at this point, and then Gparted is going to offer to fix that problem, let it do it, and then recreate a partition table, and that should take care of that. I've had that happen on a couple of client machines, so we want to make sure that we're starting out with a completely clean, fresh hard drive with a fresh partition table on it. Once that's done, you can start up the installation program. And the first language that it's going to offer us is English. In our case, that's perfectly all right. If you feel more comfortable speaking a different language, you may want to choose that. The next screen that you're going to get to here is going to offer to install third-party codecs. So you'll need to make sure that this box is checked. I think that it is usually unchecked, but it was checked this time simply because I was running through this procedure a little bit before I started the video. So make sure that box is checked. If you do not check this box, then it will not install the software that you're going to need to do things like play flash video, and you will not get software to play back MP3s and video files and things like that. If you do not check this box, don't worry. On the welcome screen, there's a place where you can install codecs at any time later on. And once you click the forward button here, it takes a little while for it to crunch along and get itself together. Okay, the next screen that it's going to come up to is it's going to offer us some partitioning options. We have already blanked out the drive, so we're starting with a completely clean hard drive. And if you are comfortable with doing partitioning and you want to create a separate root partition and home partition, this is where you can do that. You just choose something else. We're not going to do that in this video today. We are going to do the surefire method of allowing Linux Mint to completely take over that drive and create its own partitions. There are advantages to creating your own home partition, to partitioning the drive, so where you have a separate place to store all of your data and settings. That's if you intend at some point to either resize the drive. That would be if you cloned the hard drive and then put it on a bigger hard drive and you used the disk cloning utility to resize it. Also, you will be able to do in-place upgrades where you can replace the Linux Mint installation you have with either a later version or some other distribution of Linux without having to reload all of the data that's in your home partition. You won't have to back all that up. Those are more advanced options. We're not going to get into that today because this video is for beginners, and this will give you a surefire installation of Linux. This will create your swap partition, and it will also create the root partition where your Linux system will live. So let's go ahead and move forward. And it's going to confirm that, and as you can see, it's going to create a partition for the system to live in. This partition is going to be pretty much the entire drive, and it's going to be the root partition, and it's going to have both the system and your files in it. And then at the very end of the drive, it's going to create a swap partition, which is going to be a little bit larger than the installed memory in your system. So that's fine. We're going to let that do that. Now you choose a time zone. It's already figured out that I am in the Eastern time zone, US, so my time is the same as New York. So you may want to figure out what time zone you're in, make sure that that is set properly. Now continue. Okay, now you can choose your keyboard layout. In my case, it's English US and English US, so we're good to go there. If you're going to be using a different kind of keyboard, this is where you would set that up. Now we're going to create a user account. The system is actually installing in the background, so if you notice that when you click things, it's a little slow to respond, that's because Linux Mint is being installed in the background while we're doing all of this stuff. So, give it your name. Okay, in this case, I'm going to give it my real name. It's going to choose a name for your computer here. This is the name that will be on the internet if you're going to be sharing computers on a network. And you can pretty much choose anything here as long as there's no spaces. And no, I don't think it likes it doesn't like. So if you type in something it doesn't like, it's going to complain. In this case, we're just going to call this machine LM18. I already got one called that, so I'm going to call this VM2. See? It took the number. Okay, it's chosen a username for us. In this case, it's just Joe, which is perfectly fine with me. If you want to do something different, you can. It's going to pretty much choose your first name. The trick here is that this is all lowercase. So whatever name you choose, it's got to be all lowercase. Now we're going to choose a system password. And I suggest that you choose something that is going to be easy to type because Linux asks for your password all the time. So I'm going to put my password in here. And how secure you want that password to be is entirely up to you. I mean, if you want to put a really super secure password in there, be my guest. But if you're not really too terribly worried about other people getting to the system, then you may want to choose to just have a simple password. Whether you want the system to log in automatically is entirely up to you. The difference between these two things here is that if the system is allowed to log in automatically when you start your computer, it's just going to log right into your account. There you are, you're in your account. If you choose to require a password, then it's going to stop at the login screen and you will have to put your password in. If you intend to be the only person using this computer and you're not going to create any other user accounts on it, then logging in automatically is just fine, and you can go ahead and do that. And I always do that with virtual machines, so let's choose that. Whether or not to encrypt your home folder. This is if you're terribly worried about somebody coming along and booting up your machine with a USB stick or something like that and having access to your files. You may want to choose to encrypt your home folder, which means that the only person that can actually get to your files is you, and that would mean that the only operating system that can read it is the one that's installed on the computer. It creates a key and it puts it in the root partition of your system, or the root folder, directory, whatever you want to call it. And then to read the home folder, it has to match up. If it doesn't match up, it ain't going to do it. So yes, it is super secure. It's very nice to have. Now, if you did do a fancy partitioning scheme where you put your home folder in a separate partition, this will negate the ability to reinstall the operating system and retain that folder, because without that key, it won't be able to read it and it'll be totally dead. But in this case, we're not going to encrypt, and we've created one big partition anyway, so we're not going to use those options, so we're not going to worry about it. Encrypting your home folder does have a performance hit on the system. It slows it down a little bit, just to let you know. So we have all that information in there, and we're going to go ahead and let the installer finish installing. Now, the Linux Mint installer has been working the whole time. Ever since we turned it loose after we allowed it to partition the drive, it's been installing the system, so it's chugging along here. Once again, how long this is going to take is going to depend on your hardware. It's going to depend on the speed of your internet connection. It can be anywhere from 5 minutes to as much as an hour, and it all depends on the hardware on the system and the internet connection. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and let this system install itself, and we will come back and as soon as I see my other there we go, and then we will continue with the installation process. Took a little while for that to switch desktops, and then we will get into the post-install part of the operation. Linux Mint has finished installing, and it is time to restart the system. So if you have a USB stick, go ahead and pull it out of the system at this point. If you have a DVD, go ahead and leave it in because it's going to prompt us to eject that DVD. So to restart the system, just choose Restart Now. And we'll see what our fresh new install of Linux Mint is going to look like. It shouldn't look anything different than the live install looked, the live version that we were running, but you never know, right? It's always a little bit edgy and exciting whenever you install an operating system and you reboot it for the first time. And it's taking its time here to get itself all shut down. And it should prompt us here in just a moment to remove the DVD. The install process for me took about 5 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. So it really doesn't take long if you have pretty fast hardware. And this machine actually is pretty average. It's got an i5 processor in it. We're installing in a virtual machine, and it uses a regular spinning hard drive. I do not have a solid-state hard drive in this computer. And it appears that Linux Mint has locked up on the shutdown. This happens in virtual machines. It may happen with your hardware. Never fear. Just reset the machine by pressing the power button and holding it down for about 5 seconds. In this case, I'm just going to use the controls here that come along with the virtual machine hypervisor, and I'm going to reset it. And it's going to boot back into the DVD. We didn't remove it yet. If that happens to you, just go ahead and power off the machine again. Power off. I didn't need help. Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to go in here to Settings, go to Storage, there's our DVD, and we're going to remove it from the device. And now we will boot into the installation that we just installed. If you run into a similar issue like that where the machine doesn't shut down and it doesn't eject the DVD the way it's supposed to, then all you have to do is, okay, well, I didn't do it. Just do that one more time here and get it right this time. Go to Storage. Yup. Eject the DVD. Forgot to click OK. That's what caused the problem. And you'll notice that it's going to boot a lot faster this time than it did from the installation media. It does take a little bit of time on the first boot because it has to create some desktop settings. After this, it will actually boot faster than it is now. There we go. And here is our Linux Mint desktop. It's complaining about running in software rendering mode. We're going to fix that in just a couple of moments as we move through this process. We have our welcome screen. This time we're not running off of a DVD or boot device. We are running off of Linux Mint installed on the local drive. Okay, so let's do the post-installation setup. First thing that we need to do is launch Update Manager and choose an update scheme. and we will install all of the updates. Let's go ahead and do that. And I strongly suggest that you do this before you do anything else to the system. Although what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the fonts setting here so I can make them a little bit bigger. Makes it easier for me to see, makes it easier for you to see. You may want to do that first too, depending on the resolution of your monitor and what you're used to looking at. Okay, so we will launch the Update Manager. And the first thing it's going to ask us to do is to choose an update scheme. And that is at what level of security versus stability we want to choose for our system. The default is the middle setting. That is the one I recommend for pretty much everyone. What that will do is it will install all the updates that do not have the potential to cause a problem with the system, and it will show you updates that do. So things like kernel updates and base system updates for things that affect how the system runs, you'll have to approve before they get installed. Or if you don't care, you just go ahead, you can just set it to install everything, and then you'll deal with whatever problem that comes along. If you are brand new to Linux and you don't really understand why a kernel update might destabilize the system, then I would suggest that you choose the first option, which is basically not going to install anything that has the potential to destabilize your system. It is slightly less secure, but it's more stable. Later on, you can modify these settings once you get a little bit more comfortable with the idea of upgrading kernels and you understand a little bit more about how the system works. In this case, I'm just going to choose the second option. And the Update Manager is now getting itself together. It's going to display any updates that are available. It's prompting us here to choose a mirror. We're going to go ahead and do that because this is an important step to take. So, put your password in. And click there, and what this will do is it's going to go out to the internet and it's going to ping all of the mirrors that are available, all the different places that you can download files for your Linux Mint distribution. And it's going to rank them by speed. So I know James Madison University is usually the fastest for me, so I'm going to go ahead and apply that. You may want to wait for that to go through the entire process. And you need to do the same thing for the Ubuntu base repositories. This is everything that Linux Mint gets from the Ubuntu 16.04 distribution, and it's a different repository. Here it's showing me Duke University, which is relatively close to me, but it's not usually the fastest. Virginia Tech is usually the fastest. I didn't know what that was in a past video, by the way, when I was talking about this, and somebody pointed out that that was Virginia Tech. Thank you very much. I thought it was someplace in Vermont because I just didn't look closely enough at it to figure out what it was. So now that we have our repos all hooked up, we have our mirrors set up, we're good to go. You want to update the cache. This means it'll go out and it will contact all of those servers and make sure that everything in the system is all up to date. It's all synced up and ready to install the updates. Once that's done, you can just go ahead and close this Software Sources menu. And you see we have a whole bunch of updates to install to the system. And you can just turn it loose and let it install at this point if you want it to. Actually, not if you wanted to. This is something that you really need to do. Before you do anything else to the system, install the updates. And to do that, you would just click Install Updates, and it would take off and install the updates. We're going to go ahead and do that. Now, this may take some time, ladies and gentlemen, depending on how many updates there are. If you have a lot of updates, this could take a while. And we've already got a little bit of an error here. This update is going to trigger additional changes, which means that it is going to install an extra piece of software there. We're going to go ahead and let it do that. And this will take a little bit of time. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and switch over here. We're going to take a look at our next steps, and we're going to pause the video. We'll come back when that update process is complete. The system has installed the first round of updates, and we now have a couple of updates listed that are security updates. These are updates to the Linux kernel and the Linux-based system, and these updates you have to go ahead and tell the system to install, because updates like this do have the potential to cause problems. However, in my experience, I haven't had any major problems doing this, and I suggest that you go ahead and upgrade the Linux kernel and anything else that it wants upgraded at this point, simply because it is more secure. So I went ahead and checked those, and now it's going to confirm with me whether I want to do that. I'm going to say, I'll tell it yes, and now it's going to go and install those kernel updates. The system is just about finished updating, and it's all done. So we know we installed a new Linux kernel on the system, which means that we're going to have to restart for those changes to take effect. So just go ahead and do that now. And we will restart the system. And while it's doing that, let's get a peek at our instructions over here to see what the next thing we're going to do is. The next thing we want to do is a couple of tweaks for the system. After we take a look at the drivers, I actually have it set here that you should install the drivers before you restart. Probably a better idea to go ahead and restart, then install the drivers, but either way it should be okay. And then after that, we're going to do a couple of tweaks for performance, some optional things. We'll configure the desktop, and we're also going to look at installing Google Chrome at the end of this video. So still got a little ways to go. That entire update process takes some time. If you have a really fast internet connection and fast hardware, maybe 5 minutes. If you have an older, slower computer and a slower internet connection, that can take as much as 30 minutes. So the screensaver may kick in while the system is actually doing that, and if it does, then you just need to put your password in to gain access to the system, because by default Linux Mint is set to lock the screen after about 5 minutes. So our system is rebooting. It should be about done here, and we are back on the screen. So the first thing that we need to do is check out drivers. You can find drivers in the menu, or you can click on the welcome screen. You'll get the same thing either way. We have not disabled the welcome screen yet. And this is going to come up with a couple of drivers. If your system has a Wi-Fi card that requires drivers to work, so far you should have been running off of Ethernet. Now is when you would install those drivers. And the only ones we really have available to us are the microcode drivers. If you are doing this from a virtual machine and watching this video, then I suggest that you manually install the VirtualBox drivers from the guest editions by going to Device, and then insert the guest editions DVD, and then you will take the prompt there that says go ahead and run the software, and it will install that. So after I do this video, I actually intend to do that because I'm still getting the error where it says that Cinnamon is running in software rendering mode. In other words, I don't have full access to the video acceleration that I should. So that will fix that. Once you have your drivers installed, you're going to want to restart the system again. I know we just restarted, but I want to make sure that those drivers get kicked in. So it's prompting me to restart now. I'm not going to do it, just to save time. And we can move on to some other settings in the system here that we want to take a look at. Okay, these next two things, they are actually optional, but they do make a big difference as far as making the system run a lot faster. So the first thing that we want to do is go to the menu and open up a program called Disks. I just did a video on doing this, but I'm going to show you the simplest and easiest way to do it. Come up here to the little hamburger menu, go to Drive Settings, and you might have several tabs here. You can look at each one of them does and decide whether you want to turn it on. The only one that I'm really concerned with is the write cache. So we will turn that on, and it is going to prompt me for a password, and then if we go back into the settings again, we can confirm that it's on. What this does is it configures the system to be able to read and write simultaneously. And this makes a big difference on the performance of the system. By default, this is turned off, and it's for security purposes, because whenever you have write caching, there is always the possibility that the system may lock up or lose power, and anything that is in memory that hasn't been written to the hard drive yet will go away. This could corrupt a file or make you lose work. And, you know, if you're really paranoid about that, don't take this step. But I've done this for years, and I've never really lost anything important. It's never trashed a system or anything like that. And if you're running a laptop that's on a battery, you really don't worry too much about the system losing power. Essentially what it does is that if you have the system opening up a big program, let's say, that program is going to be writing files and reading files at the same time. With write caching off, the writing of the files takes priority. Anytime that the program says, here, write this to the disk, the system stops doing whatever it's doing and goes ahead and writes it to the hard drive. If write caching is enabled, when the program tells it to write, it will hold on to it for just a second in memory, go ahead and get all the other operations done, wait for the system to slow down a little bit, and then write the data to the hard drive. Okay, and that means that it will be able to read and write simultaneously very quickly. And you need to enable this even if you're running solid state drives, okay, for SSDs as well. As a matter of fact, there's an added benefit for SSDs, and that is the write order is figured out in memory before it is actually sent to the drive. So it's fewer write cycles, which is a good thing for SSDs. So make sure that you enable this setting for sure. Okay, and you will have to restart the system for that to kick in, I believe. I'm not sure, but I don't think it just automatically kicks in. So once you're done using the disks utility, you can close it up here. That's also a good place to check on the condition of your drives. You can use it to format USB sticks, all kinds of things. The next thing that we want to do is we're going to adjust the swappiness of the system. And this does involve opening a terminal, and it does involve changing a configuration file in the system. If you are brand new to Linux and you are very uncomfortable doing this, then what I suggest is that you just don't do it, okay? But if you are a little bit courageous and you want to have your system perform a little bit better, then we will adjust the swappiness. Swappiness is a way to tell the system how soon it should start swapping memory out to the hard drive in that swap partition that we created. By default, it's set pretty high. It's set at 60. So what we want to do is to lower that number a little bit. And we're going to put it on 10. And I'm going to take the easy way out. I've gone to the Ask Ubuntu article here about how to configure swappiness. And there's a fellow here who has posted this all in one line. So all you got to do is copy and paste this into a terminal, and then it'll work. And it works quite well. So we're going to go ahead and copy everything that is here and highlighted. Copy. And then we'll run back over here to our virtual machine to open up a terminal. It's Alternate and Control and T pressed together. That's a very nice shortcut to know. I can make that a little bigger for you guys to see. I'm pressing Shift and Control and the plus sign on the keyboard to do that. And then to make it smaller, it is Shift, Control minus. So that's a nice thing to have. All right, so clear that out, and we will paste our command in. And I'm going to change one thing. He has it set to 15 here. In the example that we got, I'm going to set it to 10. I like that number better. It's not really the way it works, but think of it this way. If the system is set to a swappiness value of 60, then after 40% of the memory, or roughly half of the physical memory in the machine is being used by programs, it will start swapping pages. If I set it to 10, the system's going to use pretty much all of the memory before it starts swapping. This is, like I said, it's just a that's just a way to think of it. It's not really the way it works. So even if you set swappiness to 0, you may see things being swapped simply because of the fact that some programs use the swap space independently of the system. And setting it to 10 doesn't really mean that it uses 90% of the memory first. It's not really that hard and fast. It's just a way to think of it. The lower the swappiness number, the less apt the system is to actually start swapping to the hard drive. And why is it set to 60? Well, for most use cases, that's okay. But if you're going to be playing games or you're going to be opening a lot of programs at once, 10 is going to make it go a lot faster for you. Okay? So let's go ahead and issue that command. And it's done. If you get no output on the screen, you know it did what it was supposed to do. And essentially what it did was it added this line to the end of this file. So just to show you that, I'm going to copy this. And then I'm going to open that file in a text editor. We'll just make sure that that line made it to the end. Didn't ask for my password again because there's a timer on that, and now you see that we have that line added to the end of this file. So when we restart the system, that will adjust the swappiness. So how do you know whether it took and whether it's working? I will show you that now. So let me go ahead and get out of here. Control X to exit the Nano program. Oop, let me get that right. Oops, I put in the wrong command. Okay, we'll try that one more time. This time I have the right command, which is sysctl space vm.swappiness. And now it tells me that it's currently set to 60. We haven't restarted the system yet. Sorry about that first one there. I just mistyped it and stopped the video to check to make sure that I wasn't doing something terribly wrong. So that is set, and when the system is reset, it should switch itself to 10. So we can go ahead and close the terminal because we're quite done with that. And as I said, if you are uncomfortable with the terminal, then you don't have to actually do that. So we can go ahead and close our article here that describes how to do that. Now we are going to have some fun. We're just going to configure the desktop real quick, and then at the very end of this video I'm going to show you how to get Google Chrome installed. You may want Google Chrome because, for instance, if you are a Netflix user, it works natively in Google Chrome. You don't have to tweak anything to make it happen, or maybe you just like Google Chrome. So now that we have our system all set up, and I do encourage you to restart it after we set those last two tweaks, then we can go ahead and jump into the settings menu here, and we can start configuring it to make it the way we like it. I've already increased the font size. Usually that's the first one I go to. So we can come here, we can choose a background. We have a bunch to choose from. I like that one with the moon. Let's choose that one. You can also choose a background out of your own pictures. You can also go into settings here, and you can make this thing rotate through backgrounds. It's very cool. This is desktop effects. I generally leave that alone and let it do what it wants to do. If you want to play with that, you can go ahead. Let's select a really cool new theme. because one of the cool things about Linux Mint is they have some very cool themes that come installed by default. So the themes are divided up into the window decorations. We have the icons, the controls, mouse pointer, and then we have the desktop. So we'll go through and we're going to put on the Mint Y Dark theme. So all you have to do is go through here and choose those. You can choose an icon set. I really like Gnome because they're so gaudy, so I'm going to choose that one. And then I'm going to choose the dark here for the controls. Leave the pointer alone. And then here we can choose the Mint Y Dark theme for the panel. And if you want more themes, click here. And then click over here. And you can go out and look at all of the themes that are available for the Cinnamon desktop once they get all loaded up. And you can download themes. Some themes include icons and window borders and things like that, and some don't. So you want to kind of read the theme and see what the deal is. But you can just have fun here. All kinds of themes available for the Cinnamon desktop. Okay, so we got our theme done. What we need to look at next? Well, if you have accessibility, things that you need to deal with if you happen to have to customize the computer to run for somebody who's visually impaired or for whatever reason, that's where you would do that. We have account details here, and account details will allow us to choose a picture. You can choose your own picture that's in your pictures folder if you've put all your data back on the machine, or you can choose one of the stock pictures here. So I'm going to choose the cup of, what is that, a cup of tea or a cup of coffee? That's cool. I like that. Applets are little programs that you can add to the menu here. Let's look at date and time. That's an important one. It's set to use a 24-hour clock. We can set the system to display the date if you want it to. I'm going to set it to put it on an AM PM clock because I'm not in the military. You know what I mean? All right, we have desklets, which are little applications that we can throw on the Cinnamon desktop. I never play around with those, so I don't know a whole lot about them. Here's where we can choose what we see on the desktop. So in this case, we have a computer icon. I don't really ever use that, so I'm going to take that off. Then we have the home folder, which is nice to have around. I like to have a trash can. And showing mounted volumes is nice. That's any kind of drive that's hooked up to the computer. Or you can turn that off. I will turn that off because I have one that's always going to be mounted to this virtual machine. And you can mix and match here. And if you don't want any desktop icons at all, you just want an inactive desktop, you can turn all that off here. It's whatever you want to do. It's a beautiful thing about Linux. Choices. Lots of choices. Okay, let's see. What other settings do we need to look at here? You can go back and play around with some of these other settings. Let's customize the panel because I always customize my panel for Cinnamon. So I'm going to intelligently hide the panel, and I'm going to set a time for it to show when I take my cursor and put it down there. Let's see, this is the show time, so I want that to be like 250 milliseconds. So that way it doesn't just pop up every time I happen to get my mouse down there. And I want it to wait about a half a second before it hides, so that's 500 milliseconds. And then I want to change the size of that panel. It's a bit small for me. I like to make it pretty big, so that's where you can do that. Okay, so now that's set. And let's see what else there is to look at. The screensaver option, I usually just turn this off because I don't need it. This will lock the screen. We have our system set up to automatically log in. And if you get up and walk away from it, you can either manually lock it or you can set this to a time to lock the screen. And if you do put the system to sleep, then when it comes back up, it can be locked. In this case, I'm just going to turn all this off. And I'm not going to have it show at all. I'm not going to use the screensaver at all. So we've basically disabled the screensaver there. Let's look at startup applications. We have a bunch that are already set here. So, for instance, when it starts up, it's going to start the Mint update program. We definitely want that, and it's going to put it on a delay of 20 seconds. We want this little program here, which allows us to log out of our Cinnamon desktop with a keyboard shortcut. So if you hit alternate control and backspace, that will just log you out. And that's nice for switching users. It's nice if something kind of screws up on the desktop and you just want to log out and log back in to fix it. There you can do it. We don't need Mint Upload. That is a little program that allows you to upload files to FTP sites. Don't need the Mint welcome screen at all. And we don't need support for NVIDIA drivers on this computer. If you do, there it is. Now, what if we want to add something? What if we want a program to start up? Every time we log into this computer, we want a program to start up. How do we do that? Let me show you. So we're going to, in this case, add a command. If you want to add an application, it will generate a list here. See, we have a list of applications. So if for some reason or other you want LibreOffice to start, there that is. Let's see if we can get, well, if you want the Firefox browser to start up, there that is. Or maybe you want your mail client to start up, you can set that. That's cool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a command, because I just happen to know that the application that I want to start up every time this machine starts up isn't going to be there. So we're going to give it a name, and I'm just going to call it terminal, because that's what we're going to set. And we can type the command in here, or we can browse for it. Let's go ahead and browse for it. I know what to type that I'm going to show you. So it defaults to our home folder. Go to other location. We'll choose computer. Go to user. And usually what I need is going to be here and in the binary directory. Nope, it's not there. Let's go to share. Actually, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to show you how to find a program, and then we'll navigate to it. So I'm going to open a terminal. Yeah, you're getting way more than you paid for on this video, gang. So I'm going to open up a terminal. I just happen to know the application name that I'm looking for. Make that a tiny bit bigger. And so we're going to use which GNOME terminal. And it shows me that it's in user ben GNOME terminal. Great. Good to know. So let's go back here. Go to the computer. Go to user ben, and it's in here. Okay. And it should be in this list somewhere. Just scan through until we find it. There we go. Should be right here. A bunch of GNOME applications in there. GNOME terminal. Now give it a description. Most people will probably not go through that. They will either add from the list of applications, or you will know what you're going after and you can just type it in. But that way I showed you all the different ways of doing it. So now I want to edit that a little bit because I want it to open maybe 5-6 seconds after I start the computer. Now, when I reload the system, it's going to start up automatically. Those of you who will not be using a terminal all that much probably wouldn't go through all that trouble, but in virtual machines, I always use the terminal more than anything else. So let's open our settings once again and pick up where we left off. So we have our startup application set. And let's see what else we got in here. Don't need to do anything with the display. Here's where you would configure your printer. Here's the power management. So let's go ahead and set that up. Now, in a virtual machine, I usually turn all of this off because the host machine takes care of that. But you can set this up however you like. Also here, it's going to give you an option to select what the computer does when you touch the power button. In this case, it's going to ask. So that's where these settings are. One more to look at here would be the login screen. And that requires administrative access. You have to give it a password to get in there, and we can change that from the default, which is basically a rotating. The default for the login screen is just that it rotates a bunch of images, but I kind of like Carbon. We have this system set up for auto login. We'd never see it anyway, and it's set up that this user can automatically log in, and if we log out, then I will automatically be logged in for 10 seconds. So now we have our desktop completely configured. Here is where you would do the software settings that we looked at when we were setting up our mirrors. So this is good to know where this is in case you should happen to need to work with this. This is where you would attach private package archives for Ubuntu, compatible applications, and any additional repositories would be put here. And we can also look at the users and groups. This application will allow you to modify your account. You can change your password here. This does require root privileges, so you have to have an administrator password to be able to use it. The account details program we looked at earlier does not. So here is where you would create extra users on your system if you wanted to give somebody an account or modify your account. Here is the tool that allows you to add yourself to different groups, which is an important function in Linux, and some programs might require you to add yourself to a group. Here's where you would have to do that. So these are all little things that you can stick in your bonnet and use later on as you use Linux Mint. So we have configured the desktop, and Linux Mint is ready to rock and roll. Now let's see if our startup applications work the way they should. I'm going to send the computer alternate control delete. We have to do this from this special method for a virtual machine because if I actually did it, it would log me out of the Linux Mint system that I'm using as the host machine to make this video. We don't want that to happen. So this is going to log us out, and it's going to log us back in. And we can make sure that our terminal starts up like we want it to, and just double check that everything is okay. Now we have the timer running there. Going to log us in. I can also just click on my put my password in. I could have waited, but I just wanted to show you how that worked. In case you don't want to wait the 5 seconds, just choose your account and then put your password in. Okay, our desktop is up and running. I have not updated those drivers yet, so that's why we're still getting that error. Terminal has opened up. Everything seems to look and feel exactly the way we want it to. You can come here and start looking through the applications. You can add things to favorites. So for instance, if you're going to be using the Thunderbird mail client, let's go ahead and find that. If I can type it properly. Right click, go to favorites. Look, it appeared here. I can position that under my web browser just by grabbing it and dragging it, and then there it is. I can do the same thing with panel icons. For instance, I don't need a terminal on here, so I'm going to go ahead and choose this. Go ahead and remove that, and then I can put other applications here. Now to remove the terminal from here, go ahead and find it in the menu. All right, and then right click, remove from favorites. So now that disappeared. So we can just add things and put things in there. However you want to set it up. It's cool. This little icon down here shows you your desktop when things are open. And this little icon is for your home folder. So it's nice to have that there as well. We'll open that up. This is where all your files are going to be kept. And we can pretty that up a little bit just by, yeah, move that over. There we go. Now we can see everything. That's good. So you can play around to your heart's content. Now, the last thing I want to show you before we wrap up this video is I want to show you how to install Google Chrome. Because a lot of people that come to Linux want to use Google Chrome, and they're going to need it for certain services, like Netflix works out of the box, and you just might want Google Chrome. You don't have to fool around with it. So to get Google Chrome installed onto the system, we're going to open up the Firefox web browser. And we're going to go to the Google Chrome website to go get it. While Firefox is launching, I can go ahead here and show you that link, which is right there. Let's go ahead and copy that. You can also just do a web search for Google Chrome and find it, so we'll paste that in here. Now, take me to the Google Chrome site. And we will choose to download and install. We definitely want the 64-bit deb for Ubuntu Debian distributions. Don't download the RPM, it won't do you any good. We're on Linux Mint. And now it's going to go out and get that. I've agreed to the terms and conditions. We want to save the file. You see the little download thing got highlighted here? That did not take long at all. It downloaded that file, so go ahead and close your Firefox web browser. Open up your home folder. Look in Downloads. And double click on this package right here. And it should open up the GDebi package installer, which it is going to do. It'll take it a second to analyze the file and make sure that it can install it. So just be patient here. This takes a couple seconds. Alright, it's ready to install, and it's saying that it's going to have to go get one other program to make it run. That's fine. So I'm going to click Install the package. Might want to go ahead and highlight that box that says automatically enclose after the changes have been successfully applied. That way it's just not sitting there open. I've done that before and not checked that box, and I said, is that thing finished? I'm like looking from across the room or something, and I'm going, oh, is it done? Is it done? This way you'll know it's done. And if you start to get bored, you can always click here and see what this thing is doing. Oop, I didn't click it in time. I think it finished. Yep, it's all done. I don't know why it disappeared like that. That's okay though, as long as it's finished and we know it works. Okay, so once that's done, you can close the GW Package Manager. Close that, and now we'll go see if we can find Google Chrome in the menu. There it is. I'm going to right click on that. I'm going to add it to favorites. Go ahead and move that up here. Now, if you want to make Google Chrome your default browser, before you open it, go to Preferred Applications, which is in the settings, by the way, but we'll go directly to it. And here's where you can look at all of the different applications that will do different things when you click on them. You can also set up what the system does when you insert like media into the system, like a CD, a DVD, a flash drive, something like that. So I'm going to tell it that I want to make Google Chrome the default browser. I'm going to tell it that I want VLC Media Player for my videos and music. And everything else we'll just leave the same. That's fine. So that is set. Now we can open up Google Chrome for the first time and then set that up. And I'm not really sure how well this is going to work in a virtual machine. I've had problems running Google Chrome in a virtual machine, so if it doesn't render properly, we'll just close it right back up. But if you're not in a virtual machine, it should be fine on the desktop. And we're going to tell it, yes, I do want to make Google Chrome the default. So here it comes. It's opening up. Okay, it's working. Okay, it's working properly. Now, if you have a Google account, which you probably do, you can just sign in and it'll sync everything up for you if you have sync set up. Same thing with Firefox. When you open up Firefox, you can go to the sync and you can use the sync options there. I do not recommend uninstalling Firefox and taking it off the machine, just in case something happens to Google Chrome. I always like to have a couple of web browsers hanging around the system. And for some things, I find Firefox to be a better browser to use anyway. So there you go. That's it. We're done. This is a fully functional, set up Linux Mint system ready to rock and roll. I know this was a long video. I know that I got off into doing some things that might be a little bit over the average newbie person's head, but you know what? I wanted to introduce you to those things. You don't have to do all those things to get the system running, but it's kind of nice to know what's going on. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it helped you. And please give me your feedback if you attempt to install Linux Mint. Then I want to know how it goes for you. If you looked at this video and said, well, that's really cool, I can't do that, contact me directly. I might be able to give you direct tech support through Easy Linux. I charge a small fee to guide you through the entire installation process I just showed you. And check out the Easy Linux website for information about that, and contact me there through the Contact Us page. Also, check out Easy Linux on Facebook, and if you would, give it a like, and check out freedompenguin.com for lots of really cool articles about Linux. Thank you so much for watching this video, gang. Have fun with Linux Mint.